Hey there, lovely people. Welcome back to another Story Study Saturday. I'm Sammi, and I'm a writer who likes to learn about writing through reading and share what I learn with you. This week, I'm going to talk to you about The Midnight Library, which has blown up quite a bit on BookTok and bookstagram. I honestly almost DNF'd this book, and not for the normal reasons that one would DNF a book, but that's besides the point. So let's get into my thoughts on this story. The book only works well if you're in a similar mind space as Nora, the main character. Where she is at the beginning, if you are somewhere near that, or you have been somewhere near that, you will likely be drawn into this book. If you are nowhere near that, not for you. This book works in a very unique way that allows the character's interests to really influence how the story is told, what is being told, what is being learned, how the character processes the things that are going on around them. That's so thoroughly influenced by the character's personal interests that it's very believably told. Tying into my first point, there is this really strong emotional current that is driving the first half of the story that is tied to how Nora feels, that will either draw you in fully or completely turn you off of the story, but it is so genuine and there that it is something that I think is very good to note. Some things that I think can be improved, and I do have quite a few of them. I gave this book 3 stars, and honestly, I gave it more than that when I first finished it because I think I was just happy to be done. And then I started writing out my thoughts for how I felt like this book was because I almost DNF'd it because it gave me more depression than I had at the time. And I didn't really know how to process that. So I gave it 3 stars after I started thinking about it because I gave it more prior. And it's not like a 1-star book or a 2-star book because the writing is done really well. The words on the page are done in a really talented manner, and tying in that character's interests and personality traits really makes it what it is in terms of strength. And the fact that I think it was able to give me more depression gave me a little bit more empathy towards the character, and that's a sign of good storytelling in my opinion. However, in terms of things that could be improved, I have several. Sorry. I think making the message of the story, what Nora was meant to learn from this book, a little bit less obvious from the very beginning would have made the story a lot stronger. It's very hard to not see it coming with how the story starts. It's kind of the only outcome that could really happen in terms of like a happy story, which is what this was kind of going for, like a motivational story. In terms of that, it also feels like a self-help book because of that. We know what the message is when you start. It's like it's on the cover. We know what we're going to learn from it. But because it's fiction, it's not doing anything special in terms of how self-help books would have some sort of determined message and how they are going to proceed. This is just sort of like we deal with Nora through the whole story, and Nora has to get it. Whether you get it or not is not the problem. Nora has to get it. And because of that, another thing that can be improved is the fact that the reader is so aware of what the message is. Even if you were in a similar mental space as Nora at the very beginning, the reader is aware of what the message is long before Nora is. It starts to feel like we're on a hamster wheel where we are just going through the motions and Nora keeps doing the same thing and she's learned it because we have learned it. She just isn't like internalizing the message. And because she hasn't internalized the message, we have to go through this merry-go-round of this is what happens. And then you go and you do this and then you see this parallel universe and then you learn the same lesson again. And then you go back to the library and then you go to another parallel universe. And it's just kind of redundant after a little while. And it takes so long for Nora to get it that you get to the point where you're just like, please, can this be over? Please, can this be over? I honestly don't really know why it's so popular in terms of BookTok talk. I don't know if everybody is just like super depressed. If so, I'm sorry. Like, wow. But it does read very, very much so like a self-help book that is not going to help me. Where like some self-help books, I've read a few. I've read a handful of self-help books where I was trying to learn something specific. And if they continue to not give me the point and they keep giving me examples of where they're trying to end up, I don't enjoy it. Because that's a waste of my time. Why are you giving me 300 pages of saying the same thing over and over again? You're not teaching me anything, you're wasting my time. So it feels like Nora is the kind of person that those particular self-help books would benefit, but I am not. And because Nora isn't getting the message, that means that I have to continue going along with her until she is able to get the message, which is not fun. It's not fun. It's not a fun read. It's not a fun read. And I kind of took a break from reading like stories because I read so many over like Christmas time and the New Year, and now I just sort of like ran out of books and I like took a break, and this was my first book back into it, and it made it a lot harder for me to try and pick up the next book. So that was great. It's just, this book is like going to put me into a reading slump. Oh man. So what can we learn from this book? The first half of the story, I believe, is a great example of how to develop an empathetic character, a character that your readers will be empathetic to and want to see succeed. You see a character who is in the world, who is upset with her life, and you feel for her because what she's going through is so genuine and comes across so clearly that you have to end up feeling empathetic to her. It's a great example of that character development, and if you're trying to get a character that your readers will feel empathetic to, this is a good example of that for the first like 45%. If I'm being generous, maybe 30%. It's also a good example of weaving in specific interests into your storytelling. So Nora was a philosophy major in college, and that philosophy has influenced her throughout the entire novel. And because of that, you get to see a different perspective on the story than maybe you would have yourself in that exact same situation, because you don't have a background in philosophy. I don't have a background in philosophy, so I'm just assuming you're similar to me. If you do, you probably would go through this experience similarly to Nora. It weaves in that experience very detailedly into who she is and how the story is told, how the messages come across, and you can do that with pretty much any interest. You can see something similar done in the Immortalists, with each of the individual siblings, particularly the one who's a magician whose name is slipping my mind, but the second section of that book, you can see how a lot of things come together in terms of their particular interests. So the sister who's interested in magic sees things magically and looks at stuff as illusions and how she can make them happen, that kind of thing. And the oldest sister in that sees things in terms of like research and science and data analysis, and that's how she perceives the world. And then of course, in Nora's perspective, everything is based on thought, philosophy. How does this communicate to other things? And it's a really great way of developing your character's interests and making them an integral part of your story. But that is all I have for you today on The Midnight Library. I would love to hear your thoughts on it because I feel like I am outside of the majority on this because it's got such positive reviews, and I am really curious to see what you guys think about it. If you guys have read it, did you feel like it was kind of self-help-y? Are you a fan of how Nora handled the things? Did you take longer to get the message? Did you get the message when Nora got the message? I would love to hear other perspectives on this particular book. If you are willing to share, it would be great. Let's have a book chat in the comments down below. So excited for it. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. It'll really help me out. If you don't want to miss any of my uploads, please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell next to it. That way you won't miss any of my uploads. I'm here every Saturday and Tuesday, and I will see you guys back here for a Writing Tip Tuesday.